What is going on, guys? It is your host, David Haas, here with the Rise Up Rich podcast. Thanks for taking the time to tune in today. We're here in the studio. Once again, I'm flying solo. Still haven't figured out how to get the people on Zoom for podcasts, but that's coming. I'm going to start having some guests once again. But I also kind of like this because it gives me the opportunity to dig into what I think is affecting people the most during this pandemic. Gives me the opportunity to really dig into what you guys are feeling, because I'm just connected to how I'm feeling, and I know that usually the people that are listening to this, that you're here for a reason. You've come to this podcast to hear something that you need to hear, and somehow we become connected through the podcast platform, and hopefully I'm going to be able to deliver what it is you're here to hear today. The big thing that I wanted to talk about today is about stress and anxiety. And the one question that I think a lot of people are just not asking, and that is why. So I hear this all the time. I'm so stressed out. I have anxiety. I have depression. And I hear these things. And then when I start to dig in with people and I ask them why, I come to the realization that they've never actually answered that question. They have just been going around saying, I'm so stressed out, I've tried everything, I have no money, whatever it may be. They don't even know the root of where that stress and anxiety comes from. So with a simple self-reflection, and this is a little, I started doing this before I even knew what it was called, but it's called the 7 layers deep exercise, where you basically just keep asking yourself why until you get to the root of your stress and anxiety or depression or whatever it may be. So if you're stressed out about money, let's say, the question to ask yourself is, what exactly are you so stressed out about money for? And then you would have to go through this scenario on your own. But let's just say I'm not currently bringing enough income in to cover my expenses. Okay, if you're not bringing enough income in to cover your expenses, bring some clarity around what that looks like. What do you need to do in order to get your income high enough to cover your expenses, or vice versa, to reduce your expenses? With one simple why, we get to the root. But if we never ask that question, our minds will run tirelessly throughout the day trying to resolve this dilemma. And what you'll realize when you start to observe your thoughts is that pretty much all thoughts are completely useless. The mind is neurotic. And what I'd challenge you to do this week is to start to move into observer mode, which is basically like witnessing what is happening in the mind. You can do this a couple times, pick a few moments throughout the day. You can sit in meditation, which would be amazing, because I believe that there will come a point where everyone needs to be meditating. The more distracted we get in society, the more important that meditation is going to come to the forefront. And why is meditation so important? Why have you been hearing that meditation is like the be all end all, and you've tried it a few times, but you've been unsuccessful? Like, what is so good about meditation? Ultimately, what you're doing in meditation is you're taking a moment to quiet the mind and take that step back into observer mode. When we begin to shine the light of awareness on our thoughts, we come to realize that our thoughts are pretty much completely useless. And I'm going to give you an example of this. I was doing a fast. I was going to do a 10-day fast. I was going to just only drinking water. I only made it 5 days, but the point of the reason, one of the reasons I wanted to do this was I was trying to change my relationship with food. But in doing so, with that purpose in mind, what I was going to do during this 5-day fast was trying to observe my thoughts as much as I possibly could. So every moment that I could, I was taking a step back and just observing what was going on in the mind. I wasn't trying to slow my thoughts down or control my thoughts. I was just observing what was happening in the mind. And what I came to realize was that the mind is essentially an insane person. Okay, and the mind at one moment would be telling me, okay, like let's just go and eat. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, you're too hungry, you're too weak, you can't do this. And then 2 seconds later, the mind would be saying, no, we got to stay on the path. We got to make sure that we do this. And it was just literally this constant, nonstop battle, devil and angel on each shoulder, going back and forth, trying to convince me. And the crazy thing about it is, once it convinced me to finally go and break my fast and eat food, it was right. But if it would have convinced me to stay on the fast and not eat food for 10 days, it would have also been right. The mind's primary goal is to be right, and it will do whatever it has to do to convince you that you made the right decision. So with this knowledge, we now come to this awareness that the mind is just like completely neurotic and is running the entire show. So we need to bring more awareness to what's going on in our minds. And how do we do that? Well, one simple thing. We can ask the question why behind anything that we're thinking a lot, okay? So I actually have a client recently. This is a good example. He's thinking about starting a business, and he's energized and he's motivated. And in the morning, when he wakes up, he has all these negative thoughts about starting the business. He starts to have self-doubt, and this is normal for people that are getting outside of their comfort zone. So when he messaged me and said, what can I do about this negative thinking? I said, just bring some awareness to what's actually going through the mind, because one negative thought can be replayed in the mind 1,000 different ways and 1,000 different times. So you could have the thought like, do I really have the information that I need to open up my own company? And then that thought might transform into, I probably need to go back to school to get more information. And that thought could get transferred into, I should probably get a mentorship underneath a guy. And so you can see just one single thought all of a sudden creates hundreds and probably thousands of thoughts. We have about 100,000 thoughts every single day. And one thought at the root of the why could create thousands of thoughts around this one thing. So I said, just bring some awareness to what it is what the mind is actually saying. So then once you bring awareness to the root of it, you eliminate all of these little sidebar thoughts that go along to the root thought. This is how we begin to take our power back over our mind. So now instead of having 1,000 thoughts around this one thought, one thing, we only have one, and we can deal with it. So I guess the first step is to bring awareness. You can do it through meditation. You can do it through taking that step back and just moving into observer mode. The other thing would be, though, to keep digging into the why. And whenever you're feeling a certain way, let me try and give you another example, because I think most people learn best through example. If someone says something to you, let's say someone calls you cheap, for example. Someone calls you cheap and you get angry about that, then what is happening is it's being triggered, something's being triggered inside of you. And it's usually a reflection of what you're still holding on to. So then you need to ask yourself, where in my life am I cheap? Anytime someone gives me any criticism, the first thing I ask is it true? And what are they trying to show me, right? So what are they trying to show me about myself? It's never about them. So you start digging in and say, am I cheap? And you say, well, no, not really. But is there places that I've been cheap in my life? Yes. Okay. Right? What is it inside of me that is making me feel like I am cheap? Why has this triggered me? If you start asking yourself these questions, you can start to get to an answer really, really quickly. And as soon as you get to the root of the issue, then you can begin to identify what emotion you are trying to avoid feeling by creating this negative response. So if you get angry at somebody, the anger is just a mechanism that you've created to make sure that you don't ever feel a certain way. Again, I use this example a lot, but I wanted to make money because I was trying to avoid the feelings of shame that I felt as a kid. I'm not going to get into it here. But money was what I created to make sure I never experienced that. So when I started asking the question why I wanted to make more money, the truth was revealed to me. It was because I was in competition with everybody. And when that came to my realization, I was like, well, this is kind of not good, because this is not something I'm going to overcome by making money. So I had to go back to that moment where I felt the shame as a kid, feel the shame fully, be free of it. Once I became free of it, all of the thoughts that were tied to that emotion were then eliminated. All of the barriers that I had created to my success were eliminated because I was able to get to the root of the issue. And you can do this by asking the question why, and you got to keep going. It's like, don't just ask why and get a service answer. 7 times is usually how it works. If you go down the 7 layers deep, I think you can probably just Google that and you'll see the exercise. And basically, you're answering a question with a question. So it's like, or answering a question with the previous question, I should say. So it's like, you got cut off in traffic. Why did that make you so angry? Because the guy's an absolute idiot. Why does it make you angry that the guy's an idiot? Right? And just keep asking yourself. It makes me angry because he has no regard for other human life. Why does it make you angry that he has no regard for human life? Because he could have killed somebody. Why does it make you angry that he could have killed somebody? And you just keep going down this road, and eventually what you're going to get to is what it triggered inside of you. It's never about what's going on out there, and it's always about what's going on in here. So if that is the truth, then nothing outside of yourself can have any effect on you. But if it does have an effect on you, then we have to ask ourselves, what have we missed? What is going on inside of us that is allowing us to go to anger, right? What are we missing? What is it that we still need to overcome? And usually at the root of it is in a feeling or an emotion. And once we can identify what that feeling or emotion is, and actually we don't even need to identify it. We don't even need to identify what it is. We just need to understand how it felt, okay? So for me, I was able to identify what I felt as a kid, which was shame. But if I just look back and say, how did it feel? It felt awful, right? A feeling is just something that we feel inside of our body, right? So just connect to how that feeling felt. And the mechanism for letting that feeling go is just to feel it fully. The thing about feelings is that they demand to be felt. But we don't want to feel those feelings because it's scary and it's uncomfortable, right? So asking the question why will get us to the root of the feeling. If we identify what the feeling is or just bring awareness to it, we can then begin to let it go. If we let that feeling go, we then eliminate all of the thoughts that are associated with it. Stress and anxiety comes from projecting into the future. In this present moment, everything is perfect. But without awareness of how much we're projecting into the future, what we're projecting into the future about, we can never resolve the problem. I beat this saying to death, but without the awareness of the problem, you can't overcome the problem. And the way to create awareness around what your problem is, especially when it comes to stress and anxiety, is to begin observing the mind and just listening to what is happening in the mind, okay? So another thing that you can do to help reduce your stress and anxiety is use the and then what approach. Now, I use this a lot in coaching. And ultimately what you're looking at is what is the source of your stress. So you're stressed that you're going to lose your job. Okay. And then just ask yourself a simple question. And then what? Well, if I lose my job, then I'm going to have to sell my house. And then ask yourself the question, and then what? And then I'm going to have to move into a smaller apartment. And then ask yourself, okay, and then what? And then most people you at this point will say, well, then I'm probably going to get another job and I'll get back on my feet. But I usually end up pushing people. I keep pushing them, say, let's say you couldn't get a job. And then what's going to happen, right? And then I'm not going to be able to afford my apartment. And then I'm going to have to move back in with my parents and say, okay, what happens if your parents were no longer here? I push people to the limit. I say, and then what? And I say, well, then I'm going to be homeless. And I say, okay, and then what? And then people are going to look at me like I'm a loser because I'm homeless. Okay, first thing that we highlighted is that we have fear of judgment. What people are going to think about us if we're living on the streets or living in a homeless shelter or living in an apartment when we used to live in a big house. Whatever, the fear of judgment comes up. The next thing, the fear of poverty comes up in this, right? Then I push them further. I say, okay, now what happens? You're on the streets. You have no food to eat. Then what's going to happen, right? And then they're saying, then I die. Okay, so then we get to the root of the fear of death, right? And the fear of death, I should probably, because I've brought this up a few times, I should probably do an entire podcast on overcoming the fear of death. But let me just get into it quickly here. Ultimately, overcoming the fear of death is coming to this one simple realization, and that is that we are not our minds and we are not our body. We are this eternal being. We are our soul. We are our higher self. And that higher self is connected to all. We are all one. The more you begin to realize this and become aware of this, the more free you will become of your fear of death, right? If you're eternal, if you truly believe you're eternal, what fear of death do you have, okay? The ego, which is the mind, was created to protect the body, okay? What happened over time, though, is we began to identify more with the mind and the body than we did with our higher self, with that eternal being, okay? And we know that this is the truth because we can take a step back and observe the mind. I can sit quietly right now and observe what's going on in my mind. What is it that's allowing me to observe my mind? Is it my mind observing my mind? Possibly. But what I believe is that it's our consciousness. If I was able to take my consciousness outside of my body and my mind and put it into a robot, would I live forever? once you start to understand what consciousness is, what our higher self is, it might give you a better perspective on the separation between our higher selves and the body and the mind. This is how you overcome the fear of death. And I guess it's through advanced spiritual growth that you begin to, because I can say that to you right here. I can say this in this podcast, that you're not your body, you're not your mind, but you don't believe it, right? So in order to believe it, you have to just know it, right? It's like, it's a sense of knowing. You need to completely, truly believe that you're an eternal being. And once you do that, the fear of death just goes completely out the window. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that you completely just waste away your life and start drinking alcohol and doing drugs because you're not your body, you're not your mind. No. The reason that we're here is to have this human experience, because in the spiritual realm, or this internal realm that we're talking about, we're really getting off track here, but that we're talking about, it's like what that spiritual realm is missing is the five senses. In the spiritual realm, there is no touch, taste, sight, hearing, none of that. And none of it exists. So we come to earth to experience this world, to clear our karma, to clear our soul's karma, right? So we want to make sure that while we're here, we live as long as we possibly can to do as much good as we possibly can for our souls. And usually always, I should say, what is good for our soul is what is good for mankind, okay? So that should help you realize that you don't want to squander this life. You want to live as long as you can, as full as you can, to impact as many people as you can, to impact your own soul, your higher essence. The way to begin to learn how to get connected to this is probably, I would say one way would be to meditate. We're here to remember what our soul already knows. And it is only through the present moment that the unknown is revealed to us. Okay? So let me just say that again. It's only through the present moment that the unknown is revealed to us. What is the present moment? The present moment is free of thoughts of the past or thoughts of the future. It is truly present. And it is something that very, very few of us, including myself, experience on a regular basis. Because we're still identified with the body and the mind, and the mind can only exist in the past or the future. So every time we are not connecting to the present moment, our mind is either in the past or it's either in the future. So learning to connect to that present moment will then begin to reveal the unknown to us. And this is how you tap into collective consciousness, or to the field of infinite potential, is by learning to connect to the present moment. So how do you connect to the present moment? Let me just give you an example. Whatever you're doing, if you're driving, obviously don't do this, but if you just close your eyes right now, and I want you to make your inner voice say hello. Now with your eyes closed still, make your inner voice say hello 3 times. Now with your eyes closed still, make your inner voice scream hello. This is how you observe the mind. You took a step back in that moment, and you're able to observe what was happening in the mind. And the more and more you do this, the more and more you begin to connect to the present moment. The more you connect to the present moment, the more the unknown will be revealed to you. So if you have a problem, without connecting to the present moment, you only go to inside the circle of what you know to solve that issue. If you're stressed out, if you don't have enough money, if you have problems in your marriage, and you're trying to figure it out in the mind, if you're trying to figure it out based on the feelings in the body, you're going to constantly be spinning your wheels. But if you learn to step outside of what you know, because we see our future through the lens of our past, so when we're trying to solve a problem, we're just solving it based on our past knowledge. We're unable to solve that issue because the knowledge that we have just exists inside that circle of what we know. But if we can learn to connect to the present moment, we can learn to connect to the unknown, we can learn to connect to our higher selves. And our higher self knows all because it's connected to a higher power, it's connected to interconnectedness, to allness, to infinite potential, infinite power. And if we learn to connect to that power, then we'll get the answer to any question that we have. So what I'll do when I have any problem in my life, I'll just sit in meditation. I'll wait for the truth to be revealed. And I see this time and time again with my clients. We'll be back and forth talking about a problem that they have. They're stressed out about something at work, and we're going back and forth. And I'm trying to get them to see that it's not about this person that's wronging them. It's about what's going on inside of them still. And we were talking out for 45 minutes, and I finally just say, you know what? Let's just sit in meditation and let's ask for the truth to be revealed. And usually in a 5-minute meditation, the answer will come to us. We spent 45 minutes outside of the present moment trying to rationalize and internalize this problem. And in 5 minutes, the truth can be revealed to us. So this is the power that exists. This is the power that exists when we step outside of the mind, when we step outside of the body, and we get connected to our higher selves or that eternal being. I don't even know how I got to this point. I'm talking about this, but it was about the fear of death. The more and more you connect to your higher self, the more and more the fear of death will fade away. And I personally believe that I've gotten to a point. I'll give you a perfect example. When I was a kid, I was playing in my garage, and I had these welding tanks fall on top of me, and I was trapped underneath these welding tanks, and I was under there for like 30 minutes. I had broke my arm, my pelvic bone, my ribs. I was a mess. And I remember my mom came out and she picked these welding tanks up and pulled me out, and I had to go to the hospital. And from that moment, I had a fear of, I was claustrophobic. I had a fear of confined spaces. And through the connection to my higher self, I was able to overcome that, because I realized that all I was experiencing when I was experiencing claustrophobia was in the mind and in the body. So when I began to connect to my higher self, the higher self was free of those fears. And I just allowed myself to feel that fear fully, and then I was free of it. So now I believe, I haven't really put it to the test, but I believe I am free of my fear of claustrophobia. And if I got into a situation where I felt claustrophobic, I would know how to move through it, because I would connect to the present moment, identify how I was feeling, and allow myself to continue to feel that way until that fear passed. And I did this by understanding these spiritual principles and learning to connect to my higher self. That's how I overcame my fear of death. I have no fear of death whatsoever now, right? So, and it's not that I'm embracing death. I'm not welcoming death. I'm still trying to live my best life because I want to impact as many people as I possibly can. So if you use these two scenarios, the 7 levels deep, we're just trying to get to the root. Use the and then what approach, where you'll come to the realization that, especially if you live in Canada or United States, that no matter how bad things get, you're probably going to be okay. Because when I bring people down that and then what road, they usually say, well, and then I'll go get another job. Or they usually say, then I'll have to live with my mom and dad. Or they usually say, well, and then I'll have to go on welfare, right? And especially in Canada, it's like we live in a country, we're not going to let you starve. We're not going to let you go hungry, right? Especially if you're willing and able and you want to continue to move forward. Now, if you abuse the system, they might cut you off, right? But most people that I'm dealing with aren't at a point where they're going to abuse the system. And I bring them down to the lowest to show them that no matter what happens, right? No matter what happens, as things could get as bad as they could, the coronavirus could go on for freaking 5 more years, you're going to be okay. And I know that's hard to believe, but you'll only see that through the and then what approach. You'll only see that when you start to connect to what is truly going on inside of you. During the Great Depression, there was people that had no jobs and there was people that had 3 jobs. Okay? So it's about how external events are affecting you internally, right? And we want to get to a place where nothing outside of ourselves can affect us. And if you learn to get there, then this is what spiritual growth is. And the word spiritual growth gets all these different meanings, but really it's about solving the issues that are going on inside of you so that you can be free of all this outside BS that's going on, free of fear, free of stress, free of anxiety. And you can learn to connect to the unknown so that you have infinite potential, infinite power. I think that's where I'll leave it. That was a pretty deep one, but I'll probably do more on this fear of death, present moment. But if you want to check out Dr. Joe Dispenza's stuff on the present moment, he's he's basically proving a lot of this stuff that has been like mystical, if you want to say, or spiritual, and he's putting science behind it. And for me, I really appreciate what he's doing, because he's going to probably create a big shift in consciousness for people. But for me, it's like, I don't want to prove anything. I know it exists, right? I just want to experience it as much as I possibly can. So you can go out and read all Joe's stuff and it's all amazing, great work, or you can just start to begin to experience it, start to move into observer mode, start to ask the question why. It's like, don't let the mind run the show. Your higher self is in control. And if you begin to bring your awareness to the mind, just shining the light of awareness on the mind will start taking back that control. It's like, we don't want the mind to be in control. We, our higher self, capital S, we want to be in control of the mind and not the other way around. So thanks for taking your time to listen. Don't forget, on my website, www.davidhaas.ca, I have my 10 tips to expand PDF. You can download that. It's 100% completely free. I'm not going to bombard you with emails or anything along those lines. It's just a tool to help you expand during this. Be one of the people that has 3 jobs during the depression, not the person that's just wallowing in fear and self-pity. It's like, take charge. Go and get that PDF. As always, also follow me on Instagram, David F. Haas, Facebook, David F. Haas, YouTube, David F. Haas. I am literally everywhere. You cannot escape me. So thanks for taking the time to listen, and tune in next Wednesday for another podcast.